strong interest in precarious employment. First of all, just to thank our earlier speakers for at least starting on data collection, which is a major problem. And what I'm going to talk about briefly is the things that we know and the things that we don't know. And then just to talk a little bit about potential solutions and following on from some of the demands as mentioned in the last slide. I suppose, first of all, in terms of the data collection, which is a major problem, we have to rely a lot on research from abroad. And of course, one of the difficulties of trying to deal with the area of casualisation is that it is a global phenomenon. And last week you had a major conference by an Australian trade union on precarious employment in higher level education. And Australia has done a lot of reports, as has American reports and unions on how to deal with it. And if you look at the statistics there in America and in Australia, they say that about a third to a half of headcount in Australia and America are by people who are employed on a casual, or as they call them, sessional basis. And up to a half of teaching workload is by casual or sessional staff, which is telling us something to begin with, that now where teaching is separated from the research, the more valuable activities of research over teaching. First of all, just to say something about casualisation, I have some colleagues here from my department who will be able to say a bit more about this perhaps afterwards. But just to talk about the confusion over it, because casualisation I think is an umbrella term which we use to mean a whole range of practices which are linked to the marketisation of the third level sector. So we're talking about, the outsourcing, whether it be of recruitment or of other practices in university setting, whether it's about zero-hour contracts where people are supposed to be available for the hours which are offered to them, and they get some compensation for it, to casual working, which is not very well defined in law, but basically it's supposed to be somebody who's working for less than 13 weeks continuous service and who is not doing regular or seasonal work. And they don't have to be available for the working away, which a 0 hours contract person is. And the reason why I talk about these legal terms is because that becomes important when we're talking about solutions. Because of course there are difficulties when we try to resolve these issues, which is bigger than just the law, and I'll come back to that later. In terms of what's happening in UL has said that the number of part-time and hourly academic staff equates to 50 full-time equivalents. They haven't given a head count as to the number of people who are on casual or hourly paid or part-time staff. It could be anything. It could be, as research has shown in other areas in other countries, is that often universities don't know the exact numbers of people who are employed on these contracts. And using the term FTEs masks the true extent of different types of employment relations. So that's, I think, a first major problem that has to be tackled, is the extent of it. As I mentioned, the Workplace Watch has done a good job in starting it. I could name 20 people offhand who I know personally who would be on these types of some form of casualised contract, if you like. So I'd imagine the number is far higher than what we know to date. There's a couple of key issues to think about. First of all, casual hours themselves are not a problem. What is a problem is how they are used and the people who are using them. So how they're used, we think anecdotally from the people who are here and from stories and from the information that's being collected that it's expanding. People, and part of the problem is this idea, and their research on the Workplace Watch confirms research abroad, that is a gendered phenomenon, that you have more female people, women more than men who are on these contracts. Now that is a problem in terms of solutions, because part of the debate has been, oh well, casual contracts suits lots of people, and particularly women, because of the work-life balance issues. But research shows in other countries that if you offer more regular, more permanent, more secure jobs to people who are on long-term on casual contracts, they would take it. And I'm sure a lot of people would say the same here as well today. What is the problem then? Well, the problem is, one, choice. Do people really want it or not? And the second of all is standards, that if you're going to have a system of casual contracts in whatever form they may come, 0 hours, whatever it may be, that there are standards attached to those. And that is something that we can do through a union, because we should know what standards mean in terms of employment. A lot of the features that have been spoken at earlier are common throughout research about people on these contracts who feel like an underclass, who feel marginalised, not just from their employment setting in terms of not knowing their rights, not having an induction, not having formal policies and procedures for them, but also in terms of their own department, as we mentioned, about the lack of integration in terms of decision making, either within the university or within their immediate department. So, I mean, I think this already shows that there's a huge number of immediate, workable, doable things that can be done to at least improve the lot of people on casual contracts from the very beginning. And it's easy to find them. There's a RED report in Australia which lists about 20 to 30 things that can be done to try and improve the conditions under which casualised people work, from the basic things about equipment and about staffing to being involved in decision making and having forums for that. The reason why casualisation also becomes a problem is, of course, it's linked to precarity when it's not a choice. And precarious work, the features of precarious work are that it involves low security of income, low security of employment, a lack of control over your job, and a poor quality in terms of your job. And obviously casual hours would fulfil a lot of those particular characteristics. In terms then of looking at solutions, which I'm particularly interested in, because academics are the best at talking all day long about the state of a scenario, and maybe solutions is what we should be looking at. And I was glad to see that the Workplace Watch put some very straightforward ones up on the slide. The first one is that people who are on precarious employment, and we should be using that term precarious. We talk about this a lot in our own work, in our group, in our department who study precarious employment. The idea of casual hours suggests that it's something which is maybe just for the few or maybe just for choice. It is precarious employment for people who don't have a choice and where standards are poor. So in terms of precarious employment, first of all those people need to unionise. Now, I'm not here to represent a trade union, and people can complain about unions, and we complain about them ourselves, and they are flawed like any organisation, but they are the only organisation whose sole purpose is to improve the pay conditions of its members. And related to that, there's a couple of things can be done. One is obviously pressure internally and pressure externally. I think one is slightly easier than the other. Pressure externally, I think, is actually easier than pressure internally. And by pressure externally, what I mean is that the higher level education sector needs to be much stronger in terms of getting the voice of government. Other groups are much better at it. We've seen in the last couple of weeks that secondary school teachers have made an agreement with the government that teachers will get a contract of indefinite duration after 2 years of continuous employment, when the rest of the country in terms of law is supposed to be 4 years, and obviously it's supposed to be 3 years now in terms of academics. And not only do they get a contract of indefinite duration after 2 years of employment, but if their hours increase after they get that CID, then they will get an enhanced CID after a period of time of being in enhanced hours. So pressure collectively does work. We can see lots of other examples, whether it's old age pensioners talking about the removal of their travel pass, whether it's hospital consultants about revision of their pay rates. It is extremely important. And I think this is related to why pressure internally is more difficult. And I think the reason why it's more difficult is because academics and higher third level education in general are poor at solidarity. That's a fact. And academics are the worst at it. They are their own worst enemies in terms of being their own entrepreneurs and silos in which they're quite happy perhaps some to be locked away in an office and to be left alone. And the real challenge for people who are on precarious or being in precarious employment in universities is to be able to harness that support of people who are in more secure and permanent employment. Because there is an obligation on people who are in more secure, more permanent employment to protect the weaker groups. And that's what a union tries to strive for as well. And it has to be part of that wider debate about the knock-on effects. It's interesting to note that some of the comments that are mentioned from the qualitative responses by people to that survey, they talked about feeling lucky to have a job, because they're made to feel lucky to have a job. And we have to recognise as well as other members of staff who are in more secure permanent positions that while we didn't create the system, we facilitate it. We hire people on sessional teaching contracts, we hire people on research contracts, so we're part of it as well. And in terms of working internally, for people who are part of a union, no matter where you are, there is an obligation on union members, whether new members or old members, to stick your head above the parapet. There's a small number of very hard mistake for some people that I might have spoken to who think that a union can swoop in and do the work for them and not necessarily be a part of the organising and be a part of the campaigning. So there's an obligation on all parts to be able to do that. I think a second thing is that I would be concerned about separating these issues as just being about a lecturing issue and not being about the wider university community, whether it be administrators or technicians or landscapists or whoever it is as part of it. Because I think that's a dangerous point of view, because there can be a perception that academics are in a privileged position, and some are, and that necessarily that other people are looking to have a job and have to work their way through casualised hours before they get that reward of more permanent or secure work, which, as we see, can be a bit of a fallacy. So I think that whole debate and message and campaign about what casualisation means needs to be brought home to other groups within the university, because their support is just as important. And likewise, there has to be vice versa for that we have to be able to support their issues in the way in which casualisation and marketisation is affecting other groups in the university as well. And the last one, and the most immediate one, is we're currently going through a round of consultations with the university president about the forthcoming strategic plan. I've been to some of the consultations, and there's been very positive stuff being contributed about how things can change in university and how the university can improve. But staffing is rarely an issue that's brought up by staff themselves. And one of the things that I mentioned at the consultations is that I would like to see a HR strategy. Now, it's something we teach our students that they should be doing, but I would like to see a HR strategy that's introduced alongside the next strategic plan. I want to see what are the university's goals and actions with regard to retaining the quality and quantity of staff. And that the strategic plan can't be something which is divorced from planning about people. Because if we do accept that one of the strengths of the university is the student experience, well, that's not done by the students themselves, it's done through and by dedicated staff. And if a significant proportion of those dedicated staff are in a vulnerable, casualised position, well, then this needs to be brought up at these consultations as to ways in which it's of benefit to the university to put these people on a much more secure basis. So that probably provides some food for thought. So thank you very much.